We usually think of early math as, counting blocks on a brightly colored rug.
Right. Or maybe like singing a song about numbers while sitting in a little circle.
Exactly. But, okay, let's unpack this because it turns out your local swimming pool is secretly a ninja training ground for kindergarten readiness.
It really is. It's wild.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we are pulling from a 2011 academic paper. It's titled Early Years Swimming as New Sites for Early Mathematical Learning.
And this is research coming out of Australia by Robin Jorgensen and Peter Grutenbohr.
Yeah, and before we get into the hidden geometry of a toddler swim class, which is a real thing, we actually have to look at why these specific lessons exist with such intense structure in the first place.
Right.
Because in Australia, throwing a 3-year-old in a pool on a Saturday morning, it isn't just about burning off energy, right?
No, not at all. I mean, the geographic and cultural reality there dictates everything about this environment. You have to consider that 90% of the Australian population lives within an hour of the ocean or, a major body of water.
That's a huge percentage.
It is. The whole lifestyle is deeply tied to the water. Surfing, boating, backyard pools, you name it. But that incredible proximity comes with, a really terrifying statistical reality for parents.
Yeah, the numbers in the research are, honestly, they're incredibly heavy.
They are. Accidental drowning is actually the leading cause of death for children between the ages of 1 and 4 in that country.
Wow. And the paper points out that 80% of all child drownings occur in that under 5 age group.
Right. And, it isn't just the fatalities either.
Right, the near deaths.
Exactly. The paper notes that for every child who tragically dies from drowning, there are approximately 8 near deaths.
Which is just staggering.
And those near-death experiences, they frequently result in permanent, life-altering impairments, things like severe brain damage, so the stakes could not be higher.
So when parents are enrolling their toddlers in these early swim programs, academic enrichment is like the absolute last thing on their minds.
Oh, completely. They are literally just trying to drown-proof their children. It's treated as a critical survival necessity.
So the environment we're looking at is born out of this intense anxiety, really,
Right.
and a desperate need for physical safety.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that the researchers, Jorgensen and Grutenbohr, they originally went in to study the broader developmental benefits of these high-stakes survival lessons.
Like physical coordination and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They were combing through hours of observational data of 3-year-old boys in the water, looking at gross motor skills. But what they found was that the water was essentially dripping with academic preparation.
Okay, so I completely get why swim lessons are crucial for physical survival. But how on earth did the researchers make the leap from, keeping your head above water to learning geometry?
Well, that brings us to the mechanics of how survival actually translates to school readiness. Because the stakes are literally life or death, the instructors, they just cannot allow the kind of chaotic, free-form play you might see at, like, a playground.
Because a pool is inherently dangerous.
Exactly. It's slippery, it's loud, kids are buoyant, they're easily distracted. So to keep children alive, the teaching environment has to be hyperstructured.
Right.
And by engineering that level of control, the swim instructors are inadvertently giving these toddlers a master class in the strict rules of a formal school classroom.
Let's pause there because that connection is so vital.
Mm-hmm.
The life or death stakes are actually what create the curriculum.
Exactly.
If I'm an instructor, I can't just let 10 toddlers splash around and hope they figure out how to float. I have to lock down their behavior before I can teach them a single physical skill.
Right. And in education sociology, there's a brilliant framework for this. It was introduced by a theorist named Basil Bernstein. He called it pedagogic discourse.
Pedagogic discourse.
Yeah. It's the underlying set of regulatory rules and behavioral protocols in any teaching environment. It's essentially the unspoken manual on how to be a student.
Meaning, it's not the math or the reading itself, it's the meta rules. Like raising your hand, keeping your hands to yourself.
It's looking at the teacher when they speak. That's it. And a pool is a highly amplified version of that.
Because of the danger.
Right. Because of the safety risks, swim teachers have to enforce these regulatory rules rigorously. The paper details how they keep class sizes extremely small. Instructors develop, they call it eyes in the back of your head.
Oh, sure. To maintain constant visual contact.
Yes, with every single child. And most importantly, they demand absolute strict turn-taking. A toddler cannot just jump into the water on a whim. They must wait for a highly specific command.
The observational details the researchers pull out of these 30-minute lessons are fascinating to me because you can see this pedagogic discourse being physicalized.
Oh, totally.
Like, the kids aren't just treading water in a chaotic clump. They are required to sit on these long, submerged underwater benches.
Right. So they're in the water, feeling the resistance, but they are physically anchored and safe.
Yeah. And when they need to line up, they literally follow painted footprints on the floor of the pool.
The instructors also rely heavily on rhythmic, patterned commands to control impulses. Like they might chant, kick, 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 stop.
And the kid has to stop.
Exactly. The child has to actively inhibit their natural toddler impulse to keep splashing. They learn to wait for that pause. They're learning to synchronize their physical bodies to an external authority's rhythm.
You know, it makes me think of learning the complex rules of a board game before you've even opened the board.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You're mastering the mechanics of how to play, like how to roll the dice, how to move your piece, whose turn it is, so that when the actual game of school starts, you're not struggling with the logistics. But the flip side of that is striking. Does this mean kids who don't take swim lessons are showing up on their first day of regular school already behind in understanding how to simply exist in a classroom?
That is a primary takeaway from the observation, actually. Being successful in formal schooling is often just as much about knowing how to behave as a student as it is about intellectual capability.
Right.
So when a kindergarten teacher says, everyone sit on your colored square and wait for your name to be called, the child who has spent 6 months sitting on an underwater bench waiting for their turn to jump off the wall, they have a massive behavioral advantage.
They have already internalized the choreography of the classroom.
Exactly.
Okay, so the pool locks down the behavior. The kids learn the meta rules of being a student. But this paper specifically targets mathematical learning.
Yes.
And I can see how sitting on a bench teaches discipline, but I'm trying to connect the dots between, blowing bubbles and learning geometry.
Well, the connection happens the moment the behavioral rules are established. Once the children have internalized the rhythm of the instruction, once they are actually listening, they become highly receptive to the content of what the instructor is shouting over the noise of the pool.
Right.
And because the swimming pool is a three-dimensional, fluid space, the language required to navigate it is inherently mathematical.
I was reading through the transcripts the researchers provided from these lessons with the 3-year-old boys, and the language is wild when you isolate it. It's entirely built on math concepts.
It really is.
They categorize it into 4 areas. First, number concepts, like on 1, 2, 3. Then measurement concepts. Make big arms, do fast kicks, take slow breaths.
They also heavily utilize geometry and spatial concepts. Instructors are constantly yelling, make a circle with your arms, or keep a straight line, hold the edge of the pool.
Yeah.
And finally, position concepts, which are relentless in the water. Things like up, down, underneath, side by side.
The specific quotes bring this to life so well. An instructor will tell a 3-year-old to push off with our hands like a rocket. Or they'll point and say, follow the big line on the roof.
Right.
There was one correction where a teacher tells a kid, no spaghetti legs, nice long straight legs.
Yeah.
They are forcing these tiny children to distinguish between incredibly complex spatial arrangements.
Yes.
They'll say, put your hands one on top of the other, completely differentiating that from putting your hands side by side.
Which highlights a seemingly minor detail that the researchers flag as profoundly important, and that's the outsized role of little words.
No.
Prepositions and adverbs,
Yeah.
words like off, up, out, past, around, underneath. In everyday adult conversation, these words are just invisible glue,
Sure.
But in formal mathematics, misunderstanding prepositions is a massive source of error for students later in life.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. I want to dig into that because it reminds me of early computer programming.
Oh, how so?
Well, in math, a tiny preposition isn't just descriptive. It's an operational command. If you don't intuitively, deeply know the difference between on top of and underneath, the entire equation crashes.
That makes perfect sense.
Think about a word problem in the 3rd grade. The temperature dropped by 5 degrees versus the temperature dropped TO 5 degrees.
Right.
That single preposition completely changes the mathematical operation, and the pool is essentially physicalizing those commands.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The pool turns abstract mathematical commands into embodied, lived experiences. And to explain the mechanics of how this actually sticks in a child's brain, Jorgensen and Grutenboer lean on the theories of the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu.
Oh.
Bourdieu is famous for 2 interconnected concepts, habitus and linguistic capital.
I always find Bourdieu's terminology a bit dense.
Yeah.
Let's ground habitus first. How does that translate from a sociology textbook into a toddler in a swimming pool?
Think of habitus as the deeply ingrained habits, physical skills, and cultural dispositions we possess simply due to our life experiences. It's our second nature. It's how we intuitively navigate the world without thinking about it. Linguistic capital, on the other hand, is the mastery of language. But specifically, the formal register of language that is valued by institutions like schools.
So linguistic capital isn't just knowing a lot of words. It's knowing the right words that make a teacher think, this kid gets it.
Exactly. And the magic of the swim lesson is how it fuses the two together.
How so?
Well, when a child hears the instruction, put one hand on top of the other, while they are actively trying to balance in the resistance of the water, they aren't just memorizing a vocabulary word on a flashcard. They are feeling the spatial relationship in their muscles.
Oh, wow. They are living the geometry.
Yes. The instructor might literally grab the child's arm and manipulate it, saying, "We are going up past your ear and around down to your leg." The language and the spatial reality are baked together into the child's habitus.
So it becomes intuitive.
Completely. They develop a physical intuition for what the word pass or around really means. So years later, when a middle school teacher is standing at a whiteboard talking about the circumference of a circle or a trajectory going past a point on a graph,
The child's brain has a physical memory to anchor that abstract concept
exactly.
that reframes early childhood development entirely. I mean, they're building a physical dictionary of math terms before they even know how to read.
It's incredible.
But if the swimming pool is secretly this highly effective 3D math classroom that physically wires kids for school success, we have to look critically at who actually gets to step into the water,
We do.
because this hidden advantage doesn't exist in a vacuum.
It doesn't. And this raises an important question, right? This is the crux of the equity issue the researchers raise. The uncomfortable reality is that not all children arrive at the front doors of formal schooling with the same level of linguistic capital. The paper points out that children from working class and indigenous families in Australia are often less likely to use the formal register of school language in their everyday out-of-school home lives.
And the sources mention that explicit terms for abstract shapes or specific numerical sequencing or highly granular positional words, they might not be a regular feature of conversation in every household.
Right.
A family might communicate perfectly and richly in a more practical or narrative register, but it's just not the specific formal register the school system demands.
And the tragedy of the education system is that it frequently mistakes a lack of linguistic capital, a simple lack of exposure to that formal vocabulary, for a lack of intellectual capability.
Wow, yeah.
A child might be incredibly bright, fully capable of complex problem solving, but because they haven't been taught the specific spatial vocabulary the test requires, they get labeled as behind.
Or they get labeled as a behavioral problem because they don't immediately grasp the pedagogic discourse of sitting on a colored square.
Exactly. Now, the swim environment acts as a bridge for this. It introduces the formal register, the little words, the geometry, the strict turn-taking in an engaging, physical way that transcends background. It builds the linguistic capital before the child ever takes a test.
But the researchers highlight a massive hurdle here. Swimming lessons are not free.
No, they are not.
They act as a sort of velvet rope. So what does this all mean for you listening? It sounds like a double-edged sword. To get this linguistic capital, a family has to pay a fee.
They do.
They need a parent who has the flexible time to transport the child during the day or on a weekend. They need reliable transportation. They need access to a municipal or private facility.
Yep, all those things.
Because of all these barriers, formal swim lessons are predominantly accessed by middle and upper class families. It accidentally acts as a velvet rope, keeping certain kids out of the academic prep club just because they couldn't afford pool time.
The socioeconomic implications are stark. The researchers pose a very difficult question. Is this incredibly beneficial environment, which was born out of a desperate need for physical survival, inadvertently serving to further advantage the already advantaged?
It seems like it is.
Yeah. The middle-class children who likely already have high linguistic capital from their home environments are getting a secondary, highly effective dose of it in the pool. Meanwhile, the children from marginalized backgrounds who need that linguistic bridge the most are left on dry land.
It's a brilliant, natural way for kids to learn, but yeah, it's a complete double-edged sword. On one hand, it's an amazing validation of play-based physical learning. It proves that kids don't need to be drilled with worksheets at age 3.
God, no.
They need to move their bodies through space to intuitively understand geometry.
Yeah.
But because of how society is structured, this natural learning environment accidentally becomes an exclusive club.
The researchers are acutely aware of this tension. Their stated hope is to eventually conduct longitudinal studies to test if these specific mathematical skills genuinely transfer out of the pool.
Like, do they translate into higher scores in formal testing environments?
Exactly. And if they can definitively prove that transfer, their goal is to use that data to advocate for systemic change. They want to make these types of structured early years swimming experiences universally available to all young Australians, regardless of a family's income or background.
Because it compounded benefits, combining life-saving water safety, gross motor physical development, and mathematical linguistic capital, they're just too significant to gatekeep.
Definitely. It really forces you to reevaluate the spaces we put children in.
Oh, absolutely.
It strips away the illusion that learning is confined to a desk or a chalkboard. The physical world is constantly demanding that we calculate, measure, and position ourselves. The geometry is everywhere if we just start paying attention to the language used to navigate it.
So to bring all of this together for you, we've uncovered today that early years swim lessons, originally designed out of a desperate need to prevent toddler drownings, have a massive secondary function.
They really do.
They serve as rich mathematical environments. They force toddlers to learn the critical pedagogic discourse of formal schooling, the meta rules of waiting, listening, and impulse control.
Right?
And through the constant verbal commands required to navigate the water, they build vital linguistic capital. They take the abstract prepositions of mathematics over, under, past, through, and turn them into lived bodily experiences.
It's a powerful reminder that human cognition is deeply, deeply tied to our physical movement through space.
With that in mind, I want to challenge you to look differently at the informal environments around you. Whether you're navigating life with kids or you're just intensely curious about how the human brain acquires complex knowledge, start paying attention to the hidden classrooms in everyday life.
Yes, they are everywhere.
Think about how the physical coordination of a youth sports field, or the precise fractions and measurements occurring in a kitchen while baking, or even the spatial awareness required in a community garden, might be secretly teaching the formal language of academia.
We are constantly interacting with informal curriculums.
We really are. Which brings us to a final thought for you to mull over. If navigating the physical three-dimensional space of a swimming pool naturally and effectively teaches spatial geometry and school readiness, how could we intentionally redesign the spaces that are actually free and accessible?
Oh, I love that.
Imagine if we looked at city parks, public playgrounds, or even just the sidewalks we walk on every day, and purposefully engineered them with visual cues, angles, and pathways to implicitly teach these exact same mathematical commands to all children. We could take the secret curriculum out of the gated ninja training ground and build it right into the open world for everyone.